Welcome to MyLife, Chassidus Applied, episode 155. We are in the week that's leading next Shabbos to Parsha Vayakhel-Pekudei. It's also Parshas Hachodesh, the extra Parsha we read, whether it's when Shabbos before Rosh Chodesh Nisan or the Shabbos of Rosh Chodesh Nisan. And it's also Chof Hei Adar, which is a day that is in all our hearts. So I'd like to talk about all those, and I begin with a dedication dedicated to one of our primary supporters of making this MyLife Chassidus Applied possible, in honor of the birthday of Yitzchak ben Leah and his son Michael ben Rivka Vika on the 27th of Adar, both birthdays. So it's the end of Sefer Shmos, there's five Chumashim, Sefer Shmos, Vayakhel-Pekudei, Chazak of Sefer Shmos, and in many of the sikhs the Rebbe talks about how this Sefer is called Sefer HaGeula, as the Ramban puts it in his introduction in the beginning of Parshas Shmos. He says it's called the Sefer HaGeula. Why? Because the whole Sefer is primarily about Geulas Mitzrayim and the events that followed, were subsequently followed from the redemption from Egypt. But the question, of course, begs, the Rebbe says, what about Parshas Shmos and Vayakhel and half of Parshas Bay? The first 2.5 chapters of this book don't talk ostensibly about Geulah. On the contrary, they talk about the Golas and the deepest Golas. And yet the whole Sefer is called Geulah. So the fundamental of Chassidic understanding of this, because the whole purpose of the Geulah is yetzer b'rechush gadol, as Hashem told Avram Avinu by the Bris Ben Absarim in Parshas Lech Lecha, that the whole purpose of the Yerid is tzedek aliyah. The descent is in order for there to be the Geulah. So even the first chapters, which at the time were negative and darkness and a deep darkness, are ultimately a stepping stone to bring into the Geulah. And not just the Geulah, but a Geulah that would redeem and elevate the 202 sparks. The Erev Rav, Ole Imam Rav. So Chassidus from Kabbalah cites the Rav Reish Beis as the 202 of the 200, and Rapach 88 sparks of Merachefes. Al Pnei Hamayim Merachefes is the AC is the words Rapach Mes. There's 288 sparks, general sparks that fell through the shattering of the containers of Olam Hamalbish, and 202 of them, leaving 86, which is the reason there's 86 mitzvahs that we have after the Churban Beis Hamikdash. For the rest of the thousands of years, as the Alter Rebbe explains, how is it in 210 years they elevated 202 sparks, and then the rest is 86 sparks? Is because they were neshamas klolis, they were collective souls, and they also had collective sparks, so they had the power to elevate many more. We are branches of those collective souls. So for us, it takes a lot more work and a lot more time to elevate less sparks, but the necessary ones as well. But to take it back to the chapter, is that the Geulas Mitzrayim is part of the Sefer HaGeula, which concludes with Vayakhel-Pekudei. Vayakhel-Pekudei, of course, is right after the Mishkan is erected and established. So Vayakhel-Pekudei is first of all, we hear about the command to build the Mishkan, and then finally them actually building it, and then finally in Pekudei, when the Rosh Chodesh Nisan, when the Mishkan finally was established for the first time in history, V'shachanti b'seichem. So in essence, the entire book is about the manifestation of the divine in this world, which is the Geulah. Now, as the Rebbe explains, just like the redemption then will also be the final redemption, the same idea will be the complete and permanent Beis Hamikdash, Mikdash Adonai Keinu Yadecha, the third temple. So the Sefer really captures the whole essence and theme of our lives. The difficulties we go through, the challenges we go through, and then the redemption that follows. And the redemption that follows that brings the mandate of the Torah that is given to us, the blueprint for life. And that blueprint is that with the purpose that we should build a temple, we should build a sanctuary, a sacred space of this world in our homes, in our hearts, where the divine rests and finds a permanent dwelling place in this world. So that's what this chapter captures. So when we're talking here, Vayakhel-Pekudei, the end of the chapter, it's really the end of the chapter that began with Parshas Shmeis. And what's the connection to Vayakhel-Pekudei itself? So Vayakhel-Pekudei, Vayakhel is gathering together, Pekudei is to count. As the Rebbe emphasizes, that in any type of effort, in any good work, you have to have both a vision, a collective element which collects together the details, but you also have to have each detail. So there's no focus only on the individual or only on the group. It's a combination of Vayakhel-Pekudei, which is the way these two chapters are read most of the years. And the same thing in the Mishkan. The Mishkan, on one hand, was a general Mishkan where the divine presence rested in all the containers, and all the Klei HaMikdash, and in the building itself, the structure itself. But then each specific detail is necessary. And the halachic discussion, which is more important, the details or the overall, but the bottom line, you need both, which explains the famous dialogue between Moshe and Betzalel. Moshe, who gave the command, said first, if you read in Parshat Truma, first the containers were built. Comes Betzalel and says, and then he talks about the structure. Betzalel says that's not the way you build a building. First you build a building before you bring the containers into it. First you build a house, then you bring in the furniture. And Moshe says, you're right. So Chassidus makes a whole fuss. What does that mean? What was Moshe's Havamina? Because Moshe was talking about the Vayakhel. Vayakhel Moshe, the collective vision. Moshe, the visionary, is talking about the vision. And the vision is in the containers. That's the whole purpose, that the Mishkan should be a functional one. Betzalel was the architect. The architect talks in terms of how you build it, the step-by-step process, which the step-by-step process can't be just defined by the vision, it's defined by the details. And the details, it goes the other way around. You first build the building, and then you bring the containers into it. So for any good functioning entity to exist, you need both. You need a vision, and you need the details. People who only have a vision without an actualization of details, you'll not fulfill its objective. If you have only the details without the vision, it can lose cohesion and lose focus. So all this is necessary in the purpose of each one of our lives. So you have your tremendous lessons in life in Chassidus Applied. Firstly, that all the darkness that we go through leads ultimately to Geula, Sefer Geula. It's one story. Number two, that we need to have both a collective vision for our lives of what the general objective is, where's the direction we're going toward Geula. At the same time, you need also to focus on the details, on the Pekudei. And they have to come together. And finally, let's talk about Chof Hei Adar, which is a sad day in our calendar. Chof Hei Adar is the day, that Monday, that the dark Monday evening when the Rebbe suffered a stroke. No other way, better way to put it. Bluntly put, a stroke in Tafshin Nun Beis. And ever since then, Begashmis, the Rebbe did not speak to us and did not continue writing. It affected him that way. How are we supposed to look at that? So the Rebbe himself, 6 weeks before Chof Hei Adar, spoke the famous Sikha, Gimel Shvat, where he spoke about a stroke of the Frierdiker Rebbe. And briefly, he essentially said that that Moshe Rabbeinu also, Golus was, Dibur Shel Moshe was in Golus. He couldn't speak. Moshe was Kvad Peh v'Kvad Loshen. Aral Sfasayim, Loi Ish Dvarim Anechi, different expressions. Because Moshe was a man, Min Amayim Mishisiu, as Chassidus explains, he was drawn from water. Water is the oft-discussed, the hidden world of thought. And thought is beyond speech. It's too intense to be expressed in speech. So in a sense, it's a deeper level. But that's not what we want. We want it to be manifest in this world. So that's why the Eibishter told Moshe, you'll take Aaron, Aaron will be your speaker, your spokesperson, will be your mouthpiece. And that's what the Rebbe concluded, that when a Rebbe suffers a stroke, it's the job of the Chassidim, the people who heard his words, to be his mouthpiece, to be the one that speak his words. An interesting thing, Moshe Rabbeinu, even though Loi Ish Dvarim Anechi, I'm not a man of words, which is why I said to the Eibishter, why are you choosing me? Yet his words become eternalized more than any other person in history's words, to the point that we have a whole sefer, Eila Advarim Asher Dibra Moshe. Loi Ish Dvarim, the man of no words, left us an entire book called the words of Moshe, in addition to the whole Torah being considered Torah's Moshe, meaning because Maseh Nafshe allows, since he gave his life for it. So he becomes the mouthpiece, as the Eibishter says, those immortal words, to Moshe Rabbeinu, Misam Pela Adam. Who then gives a man a mouth to speak? Do you think a speaker is someone who's a great orator, great articulation, great ideas? I am the giver of speech. I want you to speak my words. So it's not about how well you speak and how clear it comes out in its expression, but that is divine words, and divine words are eternal. And Moshe did get the message across, and finally Pari did release the Jews. And we have a Torah's Moshe, we have a Torah that is till this day. This is the Torah that is exactly word for word, precisely exactly as Hashem said it. Because Moshe was bittul. So his bittul on one hand, yes, maybe it caused him not to be able to fully articulate physical words in the clearest fashion, even though by Matan Torah, that psyche brings that Matan Torah, Moshe was healed. But there was a time he wasn't. Because Moshe is the leader of the people are in Golos, so the Dibur of Moshe is in Golos, Dibur is Malchus. So in some way, Chof Hei Adar, the Rebbe not explained why it happened, because there's no good justification, it's nothing that we see positive in it. But on the other hand, to just say that it's completely a void and completely a negative, based on what the Rebbe said himself, Gimel Shvat, clearly there's a mysterious element to it, but we have to be that mouthpiece. So whether it's MyLife, Chassidus Applied, in my efforts, or any efforts that you make, this is our mission, to be the mouthpiece of the Rebbe, which is the mouthpiece of all the Rabbeim, mouthpiece of all of Torah, all the way to Moshe Rabbeinu, because the Rebbe himself, his words are words of Torah, it's not his words. The words of Torah that were passed on, and when we allow ourselves to be bottled, meaning to remove our ego aside and remove our agenda, and just repeat with the proper explanation, with the proper translation, and maintaining the integrity of the original, repeat and share the words of the Rebbe, we're fulfilling what the Rebbe told us what we have to be doing. Why it had to happen, that's beyond our discussion, beyond our understanding. But that's what we need to do. And that's the question we ask as Chassidim. We don't ask why things happen, we ask what are we supposed to do about it. That's what we do. So that's the lesson of Chof Hei Adar, to articulate the message of Geula, of Sefer Geula, that begins in Shmois and continues, which is close to Yud Shvat usually, time, and continues on till Vayakhel-Pekudei, which this year is a Chof Hei Adar, and that we don't stop, it doesn't end. We become the mouthpiece by taking the thousands and thousands of pages that the Rebbe delivered, thousands and thousands of words and hours that the Rebbe delivered, and the thousands and thousands of pages that it was published on. In addition to what all the Rabbeim before the Rebbe channeling all those ideas, that is our mission, is to march forward in teaching people about the objective of the Deir HaShvi, the objective of our mission in this world, to make it Shechanti B'Seicham. Moshe was the seventh generation from Avram Avinu. Our generation is the Deir HaShvi, as the Rebbe explains in the first Ma'amer Bos Legani, from Avram Avinu, to make the Shechanti B'Seicham. And that's what we should be using our dibur, our words, to convey to any person we reach. The words from the heart enter the heart, and Peil Pulasam have its desired effect. So there we have a lesson, practical lessons from this period in time in which we are, which is this week as we conclude the month of Adar, leading to Chof Hei Adar, as I said, Vayakhel-Pekudei, and Parshas Hachodesh, of course. Parshas Hachodesh is referring to the Chidush HaLevana, and that is the ultimate symbol of the Geula's Geula model. The Levana diminishes to the point of almost extinction, only to be reborn again. Hachodesh Hazeh Lachem. That's why Hashem shows Moshe, look, this is the moon. Kazera Eyu Kaddish. This is what it looks like. So what did it look like? Mefarshim, the Ragachover and others, you couldn't see a new moon. But he was teaching him the story of birthing, which is the birthing in this month. In 2 weeks from now will be the Geula in Tezvav L'Chedesh Nisan, Chedesh Hazeh. And this becomes the new year that we count by the months. With the moon, Yisrael, Damin L'Levana, Menon L'Levana, we are compared to the moon, we count by the moon. Why? Because the moon reflects the fluctuations, the waxing and waning, that it wanes to the point of almost disappearing, only to be reborn again. Teaching us the Geula comes out of the darkness and fulfills, and that's why Shehem Asidin is Chadesh Kamesa. We will be renewed when the Geula, as the moon is renewed. We will be renewed in general, but especially in the Geula. And all that ties together in this process. So Chof Hei Adar, you can say, is a diminishing of Malchus. It's a diminishing of the moon, it's a diminishing of Moshe, it's a diminishment in the Dibur, in the world of Dibur, the world of Malchus, which is Dibur B'Peh Malchus Peh Malchus, the mouth, but only in order to reveal a far deeper Gilui, the Gilui of Machshava that comes from Moshe Rabbeinu, which is oft-discussed, the hidden worlds. The Chassidus Applied Moshe, Yitzchaki said when he heard that Friedrich Rebbe spoke, he said these words. He said, "Zat wie grob the Welt is, am ich kann nicht verstehen, was the Rebbe sagt." That the problem is not in the Rebbe's voice. The problem is the grobkeit for the Welt. They can't understand the subtlety of the Rebbe's words. So this is how we have to look at it, not as just pure sadness, but as a day of evoking us and eliciting from us a deeper desire to want to hear the Rebbe's words. But he told us how. Speak my words. Speak what you've heard from me. Speak what I've taught, what I've represent, which is of course Torah and Torah Sanigla and Torah Chassidus and everything that the Rebbe represents. And that will ultimately be zeicha to hear the Rebbe in his own words, with his own mouth. Because of Mamish. So, we covered that. Let us also cover, since we're talking about these dates, this week is also Chof Hei Adar. Chof Hei Adar is in Chazal, according to one opinion, Rabbi Yeshua, Chof Hei Adar Nivra Elam. There's two opinions, Rabbi Elazar and Rabbi Yeshua. One is Chof Hei Elul. The world was created, and 6 days later is Rosh Hashanah, which is the halacha. That's why Rosh Hashanah is then. But there's another opinion that Chof Hei Adar Nivra Elam, and 6 days later, Rosh Chodesh is the creation of Adam and Chava. So Tosfos and Kabbalah and the Arizal and the Rebbe brings it already, say that they both are correct, because it depends on the Pnimius or the Chitzenius Elams. If you're talking Chitzenius Elams, that's created Rosh Hashanah. Rosh Hashanah as in Tishrei. And now Elul. The Pnimius Elam is the Pnimius HaKavanah, was either created, before that, the Machshava was created in the month of Adar. Now Chof Hei Adar is also the creation of the Rebbetzin Chaim Mushka, her birth. And therefore it's specifically close to our hearts. And interestingly, the Rebbe did equate the two in the year of her Istalkus, Tov Shem Ches. So it was Chof Bei Shvat. So Chof Hei Adar, when it came her birthday, the Rebbe instituted then Chof Hei Adar Nivra Elam, the Rebbe said. So it's essentially the birthday of the entire world, according to that opinion, which is also the birthday of the Rebbe Chaim Mushka. And the Rebbe instituted, even though he had spoken about it before, but it became formal then, the idea of celebrating your birthday. So he connected the birthday of the world with the birthday of the Rebbe and with the birthday of each one of us. That should be a day, a takana, meaning a custom, that we should celebrate our birthdays through adding and learning Torah and Kiyum HaMitzvahs and Tzedakah and the different suggestions that are all already printed in Tov Shem Ches. You could look in the sichas there, the Rebbe's sichas and Chof Hei Adar and Beis Nissen and so on, where he discusses and Pesach rather, Achrosh Pesach, at length the idea of a birthday and how we should celebrate that birthday. This gives me an opportunity. We recently created, Meaningful Life Center, a birthday guide, which we send out. It's a beautiful guide, how to make your special day even more special, based on these sichas and based on many different sources. So it's a free guide. If you send us your birthday, your Hebrew birthday, both birthdays, the Nefesh Elokis birthday, Nefesh Abami's birthday, I don't know if that's exactly the way to put it, but Al Kaponim, send us your birthday, and within your email address, and we'll be happy to send a week before your birthday this guide. Just you could put it in the form of meaningfullife.com/MyLife, but please add your email address and your name and your birth date, or you can just send us an email on our website, contact us, and be happy to send that. So that's a practical way that distills the Rebbe's directives about how to celebrate the birthday in honor of Chof Hei Adar, the Rebbe's birthday, and the birthday of the world. So, of course, lessons from that are many, but the first, above all lesson, is what the power of a birthday is. Birth is God saying, you matter. A birthday is the day that you emerge in this world, which is the day that Hashem decided that you should enter this existence of the world and make a difference, because you can do something that no one but you can accomplish in this world. So above all is the focus on the mission of your life, which if we had that mission, it would preempt most of the problems that people have, because they're seeking fulfillment, contentment, how to deal with anxiety. But when you're driven by your mission, in a sense, gives you that direction that supersedes and overrides all the distractions that cause us all the agonizing and anxiety of our lives. So it's easier said than done, but it's a good beginning is to focus on that mission. Why am I here? A good chapter to read on this topic is also my book, Torah Meaningful Life. The second chapter is birth. The mission begins. So we've covered a bunch of items here this week. So Chof Hei Adar, we've covered the other dates. And with that, let us move into some follow-up and some new questions. Okay. So first, a feedback. This is a little funny one. Hello, Rabbi Simon. On your recent podcast, I think it was the one about anger, you said that you were embarrassed to be the age you are. Why did you say this? You have acquired wisdom and know so much more than those who are younger. You have become, or on your way to becoming, a sage. So what is there to be embarrassed about? I think you should be proud, not of course in an arrogant way, but in a quiet, high self-esteem way, because you're one of those people who has grown wiser with age and who deserves the respect of those younger than yourself. All the best to you. Okay. So first, I don't remember saying I was embarrassed of my age. I don't feel embarrassed about anything, frankly, except some of my iniquities, which I don't really talk about here. Regardless, since it must have appeared to come across that way, I may have said that I would have liked to have the younger years, because as the years roll on, you want to have more time to be able to accomplish what you want to accomplish. But as the Rebbetzins talk about the Rebbetzin Chaim Mishka, since we're talking about her birthday, she was asked once, when was the happiest time in her life? And her response was so simple but brilliant. She said, right now. So the happiest time of your life is right now, because this is the time of your life, what you have right now. We don't live in the past, we don't live in the future, we live in the present. We're shaped by the past, and we prepare for the future, but we live in the present. So I feel the same way. This is where I am in my life. Obviously, you always want to accomplish more. So if I did say anything that sounded embarrassed, I apologize if it came across that way. No, I don't feel that way. Whether I'm a sage or not, as I laughed, I will not comment on that. If you really know what a sage was, I think no one would ever suggest that I am a sage. However, I think, like the Friedrich Rebbe says, and the Rebbe quotes many times, a person has to know both their own chassidus, but they also have to know their own MyLife in a humble way. And we have to try to use the skills and the gifts we were blessed with and the opportunities that we were given. And I thank God I've had many. I'm in the right time, in the right place, and I feel honored and blessed to be there, to use them properly and humbly to accomplish what we were charged to accomplish in this lifetime. That's how I see it. So that hopefully clarifies a bit of that. And I think it is with each one of us, wherever you are in our age, that's where you have to be right now. And that's where you are. And you have to know how to use and fulfill that in the fullest sense of the word. And then, of course, as you grow from there, from Ben Esrim L'Keach, you go Ben Esrim to Ben Shleishim and Ben Arboim Labina, Ben Chamishim L'Eitza, and so on. Each tkufa, each period in a person's life has its particular mission and role. Okay. Next question. It's a new question. Is it my yetzer hara or my dysfunctional childhood that is at fault for our mistakes? In many of the Rebbe's answers and directives, whether about sadness, depression, anxiety, fear, or lack of motivation, the Rebbe emphasizes time and again that these are all tools used by the expert yetzer hara, b'melachte, this expert craftsman, who does everything possible to impede our divine service, our Avodas Hashem. Yet, psychology, and even plain logic suggests that many of our anxieties and other emotional impediments are due to our childhood experiences. How do we reconcile the two? It's an excellent question, and I'll just embellish upon it a moment. If indeed a person is shaped, let's say they have fears or insecurities, or other things that are shaped into anger, based on things that shaped them when they were younger in their formative years, so then it's not up to the yetzer hara. It's not something that's up to you. I mean, you can go work on it, you can go to therapy, but to blame the yetzer hara for, let's say, a person being angry, no, it's a part of your upbringing, what was shaped and defined you as a child, bad influences, especially if there was abuse and there was other really unhealthy and toxic forces in a person's life, then you're a clear culprit. On the other hand, as the Rebbe emphasizes, when a person is facing a challenge, you have to know there's a yetzer hara. The yetzer hara is not letting you do this, the yetzer hara is causing you to do that, and so on. And you have, therefore, the full power and ability to do something about it. How do you connect? Which one is it? So the answer really is, if you think about it, it's not a contradiction. Why is it not a contradiction? Because let's for a moment put the yetzer hara aside. Even if you're shaped in your attitudes and the way you react to things and your challenges in life, let's say your fears, your fear of commitment, your insecurities, or other things that shape your attitudes, even if it's completely defined by your parents, are we damaged goods? We don't believe that. A person has a neshama. The neshama shenasata b'taherehi, we say every morning. The neshama is pure. It's been impacted. Think of it like the outer layers. Just like a person could have a very healthy heart, but their arteries can be clogged or blocked, God forbid. That doesn't mean the heart is not healthy. The same thing here. Your soul is healthy. And unfortunately, some of your behavior and some of your cognitive and emotional and behavioral tools have been, let's say, toxified, have been polluted, have been distorted by things that you experienced. But since we believe the neshama is intact, we can always connect and reconnect to that pure place and fight for it. So when you think about it, it ends up coming down to this. The yetzer hara has two elements here. The yetzer hara is, number one, even if you weren't shaped by something, comes and tries to stop you from doing what you have to do with all kinds of reasons and excuses. But it also uses the excuse of your own childhood, and that can be even a legitimate excuse. Remember, the yetzer hara is not necessarily lying to you. What it's doing is focusing on the wrong things and telling you can't accomplish something because look what happened to you. You grew up in this type of home, that type of home. Your father was like this, your mother was like that. So they're not a contradiction at all. Which means part of the effort a person has to heal is to fight both the voice inside them that's telling them you can't accomplish things because of your childhood, and also to fight the actual childhood effects. So they both come together. The yetzer hara isn't just some independent entity. It's part of and parcel of our life experiences. And both have to be addressed. So there are things that objectively, for example, let's say a person, did not have nurturing properly when they were in their childhood. So yes, it can't just say that's a yetzer hara voice. The yetzer hara will use that to weaken you. What you have to do is find ways to nurture yourself. Find other people that will nurture you. Find the healing steps and processes that help nurture a person. And then you can tell your yetzer hara, listen, I found ways. So your fighting of the yetzer hara is part and parcel of the healing of those experiences in life. So it's not an either or. It works hand in hand. So there's things that you have to directly challenge your yetzer hara, challenge that evil inclination that is telling you to procrastinate, to delay, that it's not possible, weakening, demoralizing you. That's the voice of that negative voice inside of you. And while at the same time also fighting the forces that actually have somewhat weakened you due to life experiences. So I hope that suffices in answering that question. In a similar vein, the next question is making life changes alone. How to make life changes without support of family, friends. Implementing changes in one's life is never an easy task. It demands focus, determination, and strength of character, to name a few. How do you meet the challenges of being on your own after you have decided to make positive life changes, but no one is there to support you? How does one resolve to make big changes if one has no support from friends and family? What advice does Chassidus offer for someone going through major changes without a proper support system? Okay. Now, I don't know the circumstances exactly of what this question, the question you're asking is what's going on behind the scenes here. What changes you're talking about? Is this about changes like in the area of becoming a Baal Tshuva, or are there other personal areas in life? I'm not sure, because I think it would bear on the question on how to answer this question. But I will say this: even if one, for whatever reason, does not have the support system that they had in the past, family and friends, nevertheless, this doesn't mean you can't build a new support system. It's extremely difficult in general in life, not just when you make changes, to be all alone. That's what Chassidus says. Chassidim are not alone, they're not alone. They have friends. They have Chassidim is ein mishpacha, one family. And we have mashbiim, and we have the capacity to find those mentors. So the first thing I would say is that I would not make this a foregone conclusion that there's no support. It may not be support from the conventional place you expected, which is family and friends of your past. But as you enter into your new changes, Why not look for friends and support, even one or two, as that are part of your changing life, new friends? And not only why not, it's actually vital, because that'll help give you the support and strength and the confidence and the support that's necessary in life in general, especially when we're going through changes. Now, if for whatever circumstances a person's going through changes and they don't have that support, so then you have to wonder, maybe you should take it slower. Maybe you should wait till you get more support before that change is made. Again, since I don't know what changes we're talking about, it's very hard to comment, because I think you want to go in with as much strength as possible. Now, at the end of the day, we are in some way alone in this world. There is an existential loneliness. So even if you have a good mentor and mashpia, even if you have good friends, there is a certain part of us that is alone. So Chassidus teaches us that alone connects to the divine aloneness. The bodod, the negative loneliness, can connect to the divine loneliness. That this is a nation that's bodod, am lebodod yishkin. It's a nation that stands apart. And to find the uniqueness in you that actually is individual and singular to you. But it's not a contradiction, like Hillel says, Im ein ani li mili. If I'm not for myself, who will be for me? We all need to have that confidence and strength within ourselves. Im ani la'atzmi mo ani, what will I be? If I'm only for myself, what will I be? Which one to begin with? Hillel begins with first that inner confidence. But sometimes you need the others to help you build your own confidence. Everybody in their particular situation. So to sum up, we need support. If you don't get support from one place, look for it elsewhere. At the same time, there is an ability to be able to connect to your divine source and feel that connection, even if you are not having the full support of others. And that we have to bring, obviously, the best of all worlds together and have the best of both the support and your individuality. Because at the end of the day, good support will bolster and strengthen what makes you unique and individual. Okay, and since God does not ask us something that we're not capable of achieving, means that you can, if you look hard enough, you will find that support. You will find the individual. Support doesn't necessarily mean hundreds of people. It could be one person, two people. The main thing is the quality of that support. Okay. The next question. Toxic people. What's the healthiest way to deal with toxic people? Okay. Oh, I want to just go back for a moment. In the section where I spoke about the yetzer hara of dysfunctional childhood, I wanted to add one more point, and also that I was discussed previously in chapter 120, in episode 120, where we talked about blaming parents for negative tendencies. So there's overlap there. But I wanted to add one more thing. And that is, there are obviously situations where a person has been so hurt or abused, God forbid, in a home, or family, or community, that it's not just so simple to say it's just the yetzer hara and let's just fight it. So there, I mentioned, that's why you may need professional help, therapy, or even medication and other things that help a person if a doctor prescribes so, to get through, at least to minimize and to weaken those voices, those negative voices. I just wanted to add that point. So yetzer hara would mean something you directly can fight and you don't need any extra support or help. But there are situations where a person you can't just say it's the yetzer hara and let me just fight the yetzer hara who's causing me to be depressed because someone hurt me in a very profound way. You may need more than just that. I wanted to just add that. But nevertheless, they come together as I discussed earlier. So it's not just strictly help from others. It also includes the empowering you to know that you could do something about it, in addition to any other help that you get. Which is, I reminded myself as I was speaking now about the doing changes alone or having the support for it. So now let's deal with toxic people. Now this question actually is a question that came in. We recently, in the last few months, started a new daily called Soul Workout. It's a daily short piece, which is, as the name implies, soul workout. It's a workout for your soul. It's like an exercise that deals with all kinds of different topics. You can easily subscribe to it at meaningfullife.com. In the subscriptions there, you have that option. So this question was asked in context of that. Dear Rabbi Jacobson, I've just watched episode 40 to deepen my understanding of my dilemma, but it was still not deep enough. Specifically, I'm referring to the section you wrote in A Strategy in Dealing with Toxic People. Talking now, this is one of the soul workouts. And this is what was written there. It makes sense, quote, it makes sense to try to empathize with a toxic person, but never at the expense of losing yourself. It is critical that you don't become an enabler, a savior, or a pleaser. These are all the pathological responses to toxicity. You can protect yourself by setting certain boundaries, by responding with dignity. Unquote, end quote. So the writer continues, I've been looking through content on your website in search of sound advice on how to deal with toxic people, and specifically not getting pulled in by the emotional suction they tend to exert on others. But drawing boundaries was always difficult to me. Because I feel that without giving all I can, I will not achieve the desired results. My sense is that one can only transform something from within, so I need to completely immerse myself in this situation and be part of it. For years, I was not even conscious of this attitude of mine. I got just drawn into situations thinking that it was my mission to bring redemption to others' pain, losing a sense of healthy boundaries between me and those I thought I was helping. Now I am older, and looking back at my life, my conduct, I struggle with guilty feelings, especially when the two closest persons in my life still get outraged with me. They're like a mirror to me, questioning why. My response would be that I thought it was my mission to save others, but I cannot even say that because it meets rejection, for I sound pretentious, as I was told a few times. Of course, I do not have to satisfy others' opinion about me, but they prompt me to search for answers. To me, this topic also relates to Esther's story, her sacrifice, and somehow to the paradox of the red heifer. I obviously need to study more. It's a little bit cryptic. I've always thought that I dealt with others in a healthy way, but then I have begun to wonder why my loved ones get upset at me. They think I shortchanged myself. I would be at peace because I believe that I did the best I could, and I still do. Perhaps my response is pathological, but I feel dignified. Can you please discuss this and clarify what exactly a healthy caregiving relationship looks like, and how does one develop and maintain healthy boundaries? How do I measure and find balance? So let me go back to the Hillel's words that I quoted earlier, because that remains a universal guideline, that we really need two elements in our lives which initially sound contradictory. Again, if I am not for myself, who will be for me? Which focuses on your independence, your individuality, your ability to do something about your life. Not depending on others, not looking to others to save you. Not looking to others as a crutch. But then he continues, if I'm only for myself, what am I? So which one is it? Doesn't it seem like a contradiction? If I'm only for myself, what am I? You just said, if I'm not for myself, no one else will. Who will be for me? So the answer is obvious. We need to have both elements. We were given enough resources, enough intelligence and emotions to deal with challenges in life. Part of that intelligence is to know that you need others at times to support you in addition to what you're doing on your own. So let's take a very simple example. A person has a medical situation, God forbid. So first you do what you can. You go to a doctor. The doctor can't save your life. The doctor will tell you what you should do. If you don't do what the doctor says, it's not being accomplished. Why did you go to a doctor? Because the doctor has a professional, objective, trained eye that can tell you things you wouldn't see on your own. Same thing, you go to an accountant, you go to a lawyer, but you still need to build your business. They can't build your business for you. They can advise you, they can give you insight, they can give you shortcuts, make sure you don't make mistakes, etc. So it's a combination. It's not one extreme or the other. It's like when you talk about delegating. Some people don't delegate at all. They just have to do everything themselves. Others over-delegate so much that it never really gets done right because it's not the standards. So it's an art to know what to delegate, what not to delegate. There's some things you must do. No one else can do it but you. And the boss of any business knows that. But the wisdom is knowing where you can hire, where you can bring others in that will complement, or they may have strengths that you may not have. So that's the challenge, that balance. Unfortunately, many people go one extreme or the other. They either become completely self-sustaining, and don't want anyone's help, or they're completely dependent on others. I can't do anything, and they completely throw it into other people's lap. The key is the balance between the two, and that's where boundaries come in. So we're talking about, let's say, toxic people. Let's say you have a friend, a relative, someone you engage with, and they come to you and they speak to you, and you see that they have something going on that's powerful, negative force. It sucks you in, as you put it. What are you supposed to do? So firstly, if you don't have healthy boundaries, you're going to get into trouble, because you'll either become the savior and go too much on the limb, or the other extreme, there's no boundary, you just completely ignore them and don't help them at all. So first you have to assess, can you help them? And not get overwhelmed and lose your own sense of self. Like they say when you get on the plane, first put the oxygen mask on yourself and then on others. You can't help someone if you yourself are getting lost in the problem. So this is the challenge in any given situation, how you find out. And where do you learn this? From people who have good boundaries. You need to go, and if you have a question whether your boundaries are, whether you're giving too much, or expecting too much, or engaging too much, or too little, you have to ask someone objective and ask them, which is why therapists have supervisors, where everyone should have a mentor, and ask, I'm in this situation, I'm trying to help this person, and what would you do? Are you going too far? Am I agonizing too much? Am I investing too much? Or too little? These are questions that have to be asked in each case. And if you ask the questions already, Shalas Chacham Chetzi Tshuva, the question of a wise person is half an answer. You're already halfway there, because you're checking yourself. You're not saying, I know for sure this is the way to do it. So that's my response to you, and response to anyone that has this type of issue. There are toxicities that become impossible to deal with. You can't fight all battles. Sometimes you're not the person to help. And it's not a failure. It means you're not the person. You do what you can, and then someone else has to perhaps deal with it. There are situations where you could help and you should help. So this has to be dealt with case by case, but knowing there's always the balance of what you could do, and knowing I've done what I could do, more I cannot, and vice versa. I've done either, I'm not doing too little, I'm not doing too much. And always having an objective opinion on this will help make sure that the balance is maintained. Okay. I also want to refer you to episodes 40, 43, and 99, where more discussion was had on the topic of boundaries and overlapping issues that I've just addressed. The next question: discipline children by hitting. And this too was discussed in episodes 14 and 15. But since the question has come up again, perhaps a little rephrased, and I have more material to share with you, so I'll address it. Is it ever appropriate to discipline children by hitting them? And if not, how are we to understand the verse in Mishlei Yud Gimel Chav Daled 13:24? Cheshech shiftei seine bnei. One who withholds his rod is his child's enemy. So firstly, let's start. Ein lanu elo divrei Rabbeinu. The Rebbe made it very clear that hitting is not acceptable, and in explaining the posuk, either you explain the posuk that the rod doesn't mean physical, it means the concept of discipline. It's just a moshel, and that fits very well, because if you look at the second half of the posuk, what does it say in the second half? V'oyevei shechare musar. If you love him, his son, discipline him in his youth. And there's definitely the word discipline. There it's not using the word, there's no shevet, no word rod. So you can say, as the Metzudas translates, that it means discipline. That's number one. Number two, there's the halacha that says that you should not hit an older child, because you may be machshel him, you may provoke him to hit you back, and that is a big isser. So Sfarim bring, and the Ritva, there's a famous Ritva that says, I'll give you the mokir. The Dva is in Moed Cotton Yud Zayin Aleph, and also look in Shulchan Aruch Yeredeya Siman Reish Mem Sif Yites Chof, that says that in many cases hitting a younger child is also the same situation, because some younger children will also respond aggressively. So the same reasoning. Now there's a very interesting Pele Yayetz, which was written by the Mechaber, by Eliezer Popel in the Tov Kuf. It's the time of the Alter Rebbe, a little before the Alter Rebbe, and he has an erech there called Hakah, which means to hit, to strike. And he brings these elements and says clearly that Bizman Hazeh, it's not a time to hit. So let me explain some of what he says, and also based on what Chassidus says about this. If a person is total Yireh Shamayim, you're talking about an Avraham Avinu, a Moshe Rabbeinu, a Rebbe, and he's striking the child only the minimum of the minimum due to the posuk and nothing else, that's one scenario. But what happens that maybe you're striking the child, or yelling at the child for that matter, because it provoked you, and you're a human being, you were offended, or you have a short fuse, or you have an angry streak, or you were made uncomfortable. That has nothing to do with the pasuk. It has to do with your personality. Are you sure that you're doing this completely because the pasuk says so? Can anyone assure us in our day and age such a level of Yireh Shamayim and Bittul, which means you would never do it on your own, but since the pasuk says so, you're going to do it. So that would be a scenario where perhaps, even that the Rebbe and many others negate doing that, especially in our day and age. But especially we all know that we all have personalities, and more often we get angry, and we react not because of the Eibush, because our Yireh Shamayim, we want to just fulfill this pasuk. Because if you want to fulfill this pasuk, why aren't you fulfilling a lot of other pasukim that come before this pasuk in Mishlei? You know, so clearly there's more to this than just that type of pure bitla and Yireh Shamayim. But it's interesting. He brings there a story in the Pele Yoyetz, and then there he brings Meshuvah from Tshuva Menashdam. I mean, he's pretty harsh against this type of idea. And then he says like this: Shamaiti, he says, or Zechreni, I heard about a Yireh Shamayim, someone who was oversaw children. He was a parent saw children. But when he passed away, he gave a tzavah. His last will was that they should announce in the shul that he's asking mechila from any child who hit shaloi kedin inappropriately, even young children. So we have to be very, very careful when it comes to this. And again, we go back to the words of the Rabbeim, the words of the Rebbe. That's just not acceptable. Discipline, yes, but hitting, no, especially in our time. There's a story that recently was going around from a Rabbi Tzal Kin, a teacher from the mid-50s, and he ran a cheder, and he told the story that he met the Rebbe in Tafshin Chof Beis, 1962, and he asked the Rebbe concerning student discipline. He said, I'm very hot-tempered, and I used to give the kids a good smack when they deserved it. And in those days, it wasn't considered to have a negative effect. But then came a time when this approach to discipline was frowned upon. So I turned to the Rebbe for guidance. And the Rebbe wrote in a letter, this is what he said: it's now Tu B'Shvat, the new year for the trees, and the sign of life is slow, steady growth. Look at an oak tree. It takes 300 years to mature. And just think of a seedling. You put it in the ground and it starts growing a little bit. It is very small. If you damage it in any way, you will have ruined it. You have to remember that. So clearly you see the Rebbe's attitude. There's also the story Rab Shmuel told about his own experience, how you have to look at a neshama. This is God's neshamas. You can touch a child is Hashem's neshama. That's not a simple matter. So it's unequivocally unacceptable. Let's sum it up saying that. And as I said, go back to episodes 14 and 15. I addressed it more with more sources. Anything else I'd like to add here? I think that really covers it. Well, the final thing, of course, is we know the impact that children who are hit, even if the intentions are good by the parent, you have to remember that also opens up the door that a child can be hurt and its dignity taken by someone else. Because if you hit the child as a parent, what happens if a teacher who's a little abusive hits the child or in some way threatens the child? The child is now used to being hurt. So you have to remember, we have to go also into a world that is not, as we talked about, toxic. It's a toxic world. So it's not so simple that we can just play with this and just see it in that fashion. So the pasuk remains intact. Discipline, yes, obviously. But Yamin Mekareves and Smail Deichem. Okay. Next question. The next question is, let's see here. Mikvah for men. Dear Rabbi Jacobson, thank you for your continuously informative and inspiring episodes of MyLife, Chassidus Applied. I was wondering if you can address the topic of the minhag chassidim of bochrim and married men going to mikvah. How important is it? How often, when we read stories of chassidim who had mesiras nefesh, walked far and even broke ice to go to mikvah? What practical relevance is in it for us? Is in it for us today? How careful should a chassid be expected to be in this? I'm particularly thinking about my son, who will soon be bar mitzvah, and I'm thinking how to guide him in this area. Thanks so much. So there are already collections that people have collected the different opinions and the whole picture of mikveh for men. I'm referring to one that I have in front of me called the Kuntas V'Toval B'Mayim. Someone collected everything from the Rabbeim and also some of the background, the Nigla and Halacha about it. And more places that you can probably find. But I'll give you the overview. I'll give an overview of it. The first place we hear mention of mikveh for men, we're not talking women here, men, is of course in the Torah, when it talks about the Kohanim before they eat Trumas and Maisus, and of course the Kohen Gadol before going in, Yom Kippur, before going into Kodesh Kodashim, the 7 days before that he prepares. So V'toval, there's the end of Tefillah. We're not talking about Tefillah from Etzera, Azov, and other things, which is another form of, we're talking now that. Actually, all of that really fits into this category. But we're talking now afterwards, where do you find Tefillah? So you have this famous Takonos Ezra, and Masechta Baba Kama Pei Beis, the 10th Takonos, the 10th Takona, which is decrees that Ezra led the Jews from Babylon back to the second temple. So he made 10 Takonos, and one of the Takonos is called Tefillah Ezra. Tefillah as in with a Beis, Tefillah, immersion. That even though Pi Halacha, pure law, you can learn Torah even if you're a Balkeri, which means even if there's a nocturnal, seminal emission. But he made a takana that we should go to the mikveh, either daily or whenever someone experiences that. And there's different reasons for that too. However, this takana, as the poskim bring, did not hold because they rely that divrei Torah ain't makabel tuma, so you can learn Torah and it's not makabel tuma. So that did not hold. However, the question is, and this poskim disagree, regarding what about tefillah, prayer. Is that Konos Ezra, what some say, is not just for davening, for learning, it's also for davening. And you don't say the same thing, divrei tefillah ein makablim tumah. So some of the opinion, and this is Arif, and there's the Talmidei Rabbi Ben Yehuda that bring on it, that remained. And that's why people continue with the custom. Is it pure halacha? Not necessarily. But definitely the minhag to be Kodesh, to be sacred for davening. The Alter Rebbe in Likutei Torah, Parsha Kisaveh, Daf Mem Gimel, I believe it is, Mem Gimel Beis. So he brings exactly that. That Tefillah Yesem Mekubelasim Atfillah Divrei Hakel. Everyone holds. Even those that hold you don't need it, it's also that the Tefillah is more received. And he brings the Rif in Pei Gimel the Brachas and the Talmidei Rabbi Ben Yehuda. They bring B'Shem Rab Hai, the loy botlu tefillah is balkeri el divrei Torah, aval tefillah tzarech tefillah. That they were bottled, the minhag of the Takonos Ezra was bottled regarding the Torah, but not regarding tefillah, which becomes the yesod for the reason people go to the mikveh. But there was a difference between Sfardim and Ashkenazim historically. The Rambam brings all this in halachas, and he brings how tefillah Ezra was not niskabel, was not completely fulfilled. But nevertheless, and even by tefillah, it's not min hadin, you don't have to do it, in other words, up halacha, but still it's a custom. And he actually writes in one of his shuvas that people say about me, he says, I prefer to go to the mikveh. So the Rambam himself testifies of himself going to the mikveh on an ongoing basis. Doesn't say every day, but on an ongoing basis. Ashkenazim did not embrace that, but as I said, the Kula Alma, everyone holds that it makes it more Kodesh. As we move forward in the time of the Baal Shem Tov and Chassidim, you see that mikveh became a very strong thing of going to the mikveh, and it's based on this Likutei Torah, and based on the Rif and the Rabbeinu Yehuda, and of course the Rambam. And there's a whole bunch of sources. I'll just give a few more mekamis because here's not the time to go through all of this. I quoted the Likutei Torah. There's the Rebbe Sicha Shlach Tovshin Yud Beis. There's a Sicha Simchas Torah Tovshin Chof. And there's more places in Chassidus that talks about it. In the Igros Kodesh of the Tzemach Tzedek, Igeres 25. In the Rebbe's Igros Kodesh, volume 9, page 259, volume 18, page 153, volume 13, page 321, and more. With tefillah, being as Chassidus brings, the tefillah is the Eisis habitl. The Mittler Rebbe brings that in Siddur, which is the Maimon of the Alter Rebbe. Habitl. Tefillah, Tes, Vov, Yud, Lamed, He is habitl. So the idea of sublimation and completely immersion, which is a form of sanctification. So it's not just Yachas to Tumah, it just makes you a person that's more holy and more sanctified. So is it a halacha? No, but it's a meaning that's become a strong meaning, and many sikhs that talk about it. There's a Kesser Shem Tov Siman Ratio Test 219 where he says on the Baal Shem Tov that he merited all these revelations due to the mikvahs. He was always going into submerging himself. It was a constant thing for him. Now, as far as the Rebbe goes, what we know, what we don't know, we don't know. What we know is obviously every time he went to the Eil, which was twice a month for many years, Erev Rosh Chodesh and the 15th of the month, obviously he went to the mikvah before. Later years, every time he went to the Eil, always went to the mikvah. There were times the Rebbe went to the mikveh, even not then, besides Erev Yom Kippur, of course. But the Rebbe is a unique Rebbe, so I'm not going to quote that, just saying it for our own information. Anyway, there's more sources. I gave you some of them. The bottom line is it's about sanctification, and God knows that we need as much as we can have. So obviously, all with moderation. You have to go to the mikveh 10 times a day, but that's why I became accustomed for bocher men who are capable to go every morning. It adds kedusha. Kul alma. So that doesn't mean it's a necessity. And there's also the element of Kabbalah sale, the Kabbalah sale of the mikveh, which is also a component of it all. So that covers that. I believe we covered the questions for this week. So now let's go to the Chassidus question, and then we'll do the essays. The Chassidus question. So we did in the last 9 weeks was a Rishimu. And I think I more or less 9 weeks covered as many details as I was able to cover. It's never complete, but at least pretty thorough. But here's a follow-up question. I was fascinated by your series on the Rishimu, which clarified many points for me that was unknown to me before. On a related topic, can you please explain the Olam Hamalbish, a Kabbalistic concept rarely discussed in Chassidus? So I did make reference to it in when I was talking about the Rishimu. So let's quite that. So first of all, Olam Hamalbish literally means the world of the garment. You can say the concept of the garment. But there's a world, it's a dimension. Now this is strictly from the Kabbalah of Rabbi Yisrael Sarug. As I mentioned regarding the Rishimu, regarding the concept Shashua Melech Batzmusei, that these are ideas that Chassidus brings that are not mentioned in Eitz Chaim. The Alter Rebbe says it, Beferish, Tzemach Tzedek says it. Malbush, you're not going to find in Eitz Chaim. You have Levushim. That's in the Shtalshel is Levushim. But Olam Hamalbish is strictly from its Kabbalah of Yisrael Sarug, in Shever Yosef, in Emek HaMelech and Migdash Melech are the two main places. Migdash Melech, Emek HaMelech in the beginning, in the Shah Shashui HaMelech, Batzmusei, and the first 3 gates, Sha'arim of Emek HaMelech, and Migdash Melech on Zeir, volume 1, page 15a. So it's referring to a garment. In Chassidus, it's cited not many times, and I'll give you the sources that I found in order. The first time I found it in Chassidus is Ira Teira Bahar, which is notes of the Tzemach Tzedek to Lekutei Teira, the Biur of Imshach Pseishe Tishmeru and Bahar, which is the basis of a lot of ideas of the Rishimu. And the Ira Teira is volume 4, page 1163. Then there's Hagos, this gloss of the Rebbe Rashab on the gloss of the Tzemach Tzedek, printed in the Sefer Mamorim Tov Reish Mem Tes, the new version, the new Hitzah, page 278-1. So there he clearly talks about the Olam Hamalbish. Just incidentally, sometimes it says Malbush, sometimes it says Malbish. Not sure if there's a difference between the two, but in the Kabbalistic Sfarim, I think it says Malbush, but the Rebbe Rashab uses Malbish more often. In Eira Teira Vayera, Tov Shin Tzadi Gimel Beis. In Eira Teira Kiseitze, in the Maimer Kan Sipper, page Tov Kuf Chav Dalet. In the Agos of the Rebbe Rashab Tetiku, Tov Reish Nun, page 323, 324. In the Maimer Anoichi, Tov Reish Nun Aleph. In the Maimer Kol Hanena, Tov Reish Nun Beis. And in Vahi Ben Seya Ha'aron, Rebbe Rashab, Tov Reish Samach Tes. And based on that, the Frierdiker Rebbe's Maimer, the same Dibra Maskul, the same beginning, Tov Reish Tzadik Tes. And ha'esus sukase in ayin dalad hemshach ayin beis, tafresh ayin dalad aderes. These are places where specifically mentions this word malbush. But there may be more. If anybody has more sources, I'd be happy to hear, and I'll obviously share it. But what does it mean? So the malbush is described as being a garment, and a garment, like if you think of a garment like a talus, is square. That's where the malbush is square. Another way that is described is the inverted nuns around Vahi ben Sei Ha'aron. We know Vahi ben Sei Ha'aron is a sefer b'fnei atzmi, the Gemara says, and there's a nun that goes the beginning of it, and there's a nun at the end. When you put two nuns together, what do you have? A square, like a mem, a shlos mem. When you put two half circles together, you have a samach, which is an eagle. But a shlos mem is a square. Shlos mem is made up of two nuns, one nun like this, one nun like that, and they come together. So it's the levush. And how is it referred to in Kabbalah and Chassidus? It's referred to as being a second simtzum. That first Eibishter was mitzamtzim his eid into a levush. And then in the levush, he was made another tzimtzum where he bent over and folded, so to speak, the garment. Obviously, all this is metaphorical, not literal. He folded it, so that like half a nun folds into the other half of nun. So this is the way the Emek HaMelech and Migdash Melech explain it. And Chassidus explains that, Rebbe Rasha primarily explains that this is the level that comes after there's Eid Ein Sof, Lifnei HaTzimtzum. The Eid Ein Sof is, it has within it the Keach HaGvul, the Esis HaRishimu, which after the Tzimtzum HaRishon will emerge. Okay? The Esis HaRishimu is like a Nekuda of a Yud, and from that Nekuda is like the Yud comes a Hey, the Yud Kei Vav Kei, and that Hey is the Malbush. So it's like a manifestation of the divine in a garment, in a square garment, and that garment is made up of the Reish Lamed Aleph Asis, the Sha'arim of the Asis. We talked about the Reish Lamed Aleph Sha'arim, which is essentially when you take Aleph Beis and you make it Aleph Lamed, Beis Mem, Album, and so on, a Gimel Nun, you end up having twice 231 is 462. Okay? And half of that is Reish Lamed Aleph. Those are the letters of the Asis of the Torah, which is the Olam Hamalbish. It's the Asis, the Reish Lamed Aleph Asis, in which the divine energy manifests. So the way the Migdash Melech puts it, that first he manifests, the air manifests in a thing that's called Er Kadmon. That Er Kadmon in turn manifests in the Levush, and in this Malbish, Olam Hamalbish, and that is what he calls Avir Kadmon. And from that remains a Rishimu. A Rishimu remains both from the first air, an impression, and also from the air of the Malbish also remains a Rishimu. And he discusses this in the Mamorim I cited before, that this is like the Hey after the Yud. So after the Rishimu, of the first Rishimu comes the Levush, and then there's a concealment there, and it also leaves a Rishimu. He talks about that Tzemach Tzedek brings that the Rishimu, the impression of that was left from the levush, is stronger than the nekuda that is higher than that levush. But that's not for here and for now. You look it up, you could check it out. So basically, relevant to our discussion, he says it's a level of shir atzmei b'keach. How God envisioned everything that would come afterwards. That is what he describes as being the Olam Hamalbish in the language of Chassidus. So it's the Asis that include everything that possible that will come from it. Now you could say, isn't it the Asis HaRishimu? But the Rishimu is still a Nekuda, and the Malbush is already spreading out and extending in a square. But it's all square and not circle, which we discussed last week more at length. Okay. And what we discussed was that the Malbush, because it's square, means it's structured. So it has within it the potential for the structure which are the Asis, the structure of what would come later into existence. So in a sense, you could say that the Rishimu and the Malbush go hand in hand. The Rishimu is first an impression of the Eid Ein Sof HaBligvul and everything that's higher. And then that Rishimu will ultimately express itself in the Malbush, which is still in a concealed state, but it has within it already it's the Hey, not just the Yud. It's a Hey, which means it's like a square. And square defines structure as opposed to eagle, which defines beyond structure. Let's go over now to the MyLife essays. The MyLife essays, 3 essays. First one is Mind Over Matter by Akiva Becker, 22 years old. The Chassidic Revolution, Shliach Ramat Gan, Israel. This is all essays from the previous contest. So this is basically Mind Over Matter, taking a nice way of presenting, collecting how the mindset is the key. That when people have feelings of the endlessness and despair and all the negative feelings, the focus of Chassidus is how the mind has power, the thought has power to override these negative feelings and to control them. Thinking is potent. So he quotes many different places from the Rabbeim, all the way down to the Frierdiker Rebbe and the Rebbe about Machshava Me'eles and Traggut V'Zayngut, and the power of Machshava. How Machshava has the power to access, the ability to access a place that can transcend these negative feelings. Okay. This essay, next essay is Empowered by Letting Go by Chaya Wilmovsky, 27 years old, Shluchim online school teacher, a BSD publisher's translator, Brooklyn, New York. Very well written essay about imagine the world constructed in the computer game Roller Coaster Tycoon or many others. How, and basically using a computer game as an analogy that when Hashem created the world, it's basically he created a ability for the world to feel like it's functioning on its own. She cites one of the most profound ideas in Chassidus, that the Yesh HaNivra feels independent because it comes from Atzmus, who is truly independent. And how that can be, when you access that power, it helps you, it empowers a person to deal with any challenge. Because you're dealing, so she talks about even dealing with a mother's challenge with a toddler, or other different solutions and other different things, that the key is to realize that independence is a core element in creation, the independence of every individual that is taken from the independence of the Atzmus, of the divine essence. And when you think of it that way, independence has its risks, but it has its tremendous Atzmisdika power. So that's essay number 2, and I recommend reading that. Those essays can be read, and I'll do the third one, and the essays, all these essays can be read at our site, meaningfullife.com/mylife/essays -2016. What did I say? MyLife /essays -2016. So the third essay is Overcoming Pain of the Past by Mali Nu, 20 years old, Machon Alta, student, Brooklyn, New York. And this is basically how dealing with negative things from the past, how you get beyond that. And the answer is ultimately the idea in Chassidus of nisyonos, that everything is a test, and a test sometimes means that you're going to dwell instead of freeing yourself, forgiving Hashem, and realizing. And at the end, she has this whole structure of a bunch of actual methodology, which I found to be very practical in how one can grow through challenges. So with that, we conclude the essays. The new essay contest obviously is in its later stages of judgment. We'll hear more details about it as we go. Everyone should have a very blessed week, a blessed Chof Hei Adar, a blessed Chodesh Nisan, which we'll of course talk about next week more. And this has been MyLife Chassidus Applied, episode 155. Until next week, Sunday, 8 to 9 p.m. Everyone be well.